I've fulfilled a long-time dream of mine. I bought a house in the countryside. Mine. The desire came from accumulated fatigue with the noise and hustle of city life. Many people long to move somewhere new, hoping to find happiness in a different environment. I'm no exception. I wanted peace and quiet, fresh air, calm and simplicity. It's unlikely I could just drop everything and leave for good, but I was always drawn to the idea of spending weekends or vacations out of town. I came across the house for sale ad by chance. The village of Romanovka is just 8 kilometers from my city. On the lot, there's a good one-story building made of white brick. The house isn't new, but it's in excellent condition. 2 large rooms, a kitchen, a toilet, a bathroom, and gas heating. Everything is just like in the city, only surrounded by nature. I had just sold the apartment I inherited from my grandmother. The money was just enough for this modest little house. It was being sold through an agent. The realtor gave me a tour of the property, the rooms, the basement, and the attic. "You're in luck. The boiler, the water heater, everything's brand new," he said. He didn't need to try. I had decided to take it anyway. I wanted to tear boards from windows and start cleaning up. I liked the modest atmosphere in the house. I wouldn't even change anything in the near future. There's a big bed and a wardrobe in the bedroom. In the living room, there's a carpet, a table, a sofa, 2 windows, and floral wallpaper. The floor creaks in some places, but that's nothing. After the deal, I took a vacation and went to my new house. I imagined how in a week everything there would shine with cleanliness. I'd get rid of all the junk. And what a home it would be. I wouldn't even want to leave. I immediately took the boards off all the windows, went up the steps to the porch, and unlocked the stiff lock. The house was bright and invigoratingly cold. I lit the gas boiler in the hallway and set it to 4. The seller said that would be enough for comfortable warmth. In the sunlight, I noticed details of the interior, things I hadn't noticed the first time. In the living room, above the sofa, hung a black and white portrait of an older man with striking facial features. He was grinning broadly and squinting slyly. Deep wrinkles cast sharp shadows across his face. The man was dressed in a Soviet-style summer jacket and a classic shirt. His sparse hair was carelessly arranged. This portrait immediately gave me mixed feelings. It was just a face like any other, but there was something off-putting about it. The gaze seemed alive, and that made it unsettling. It was as if this man was looking at me from the portrait. Looking at the photo more closely, I realized why the face seemed so unpleasant. It was all because of the unnatural light from below. This gave the face a creepy look. The nose and right cheek were swallowed by a black shadow. The bags under the eyes seemed especially swollen, and even the highlights in the lower part of the eyes looked strange because of their placement. Being alone in an empty, cold house with this portrait was simply unbearable. I took it down from the wall and tried to read it. An inscription on the back, a first and last name, so faint that only a few letters could be made out. Below, the signature was a bit clearer. Built the house in 1982. "So you were the first owner of the house?" I asked, as if expecting the portrait to answer me. "I hope you'll forgive me." I loosened and pulled the nail out of the wall. I didn't see any point in keeping a photo of a stranger in my room. Thanks, of course, for building the house. but let it stay in the attic. That's better than throwing it in the trash. The hatch in the ceiling was in the hallway. I had already pulled down the hatch cover and extended the ladder when suddenly someone knocked loudly on my door, as if with the toe of a heavy boot. But I had locked the gate with a key. Who would be bold enough to climb over the fence onto the property? "Who's there?" I asked. No one answered, and no one knocked again. The door didn't have a peephole, and I opened it at my own risk. There was no one in front of the house, and no one on the property either. It was as if no one had come at all. But in front of the door, someone had left a craft paper envelope, and inside was a note written in clumsy handwriting on a white sheet. Rules for living in the village. Rule number 1, don't take the portrait down from the wall. I crumpled the paper and started thinking. Must be the local kids played a prank on the new resident. Maybe that's it. Did they sneak into the house and hang the photo? No wonder I didn't notice it. Last time, I wasn't in the mood for kids' games. I didn't even get angry. I decided that if I caught the troublemakers red-handed, then I'd deal with them. I had a big cleaning job ahead of me. I climbed up to the attic, low ceiling, dusty jars, and all sorts of boxes stacked to the top. That portrait belonged right in that junk. I set it down by the boxes and glanced over what kind of things were gathering dust under the roof. I see it standing there, a wooden crate filled with brownish fur scraps. I rummaged through them and realized they were pelts, some kind of rodents. The fur was sparse and ugly, and there was a stench of rotting leather. I examined them in the light and couldn't figure it out. Could this really be wild rat skin? Ooh, how disgusting. And who would need a whole crate of rat fur? Did one of the previous owners hunt rodents, skin them, and keep the pelts as trophies? The thought made me shudder. I wanted to wash my hands with soap all the way up to my elbows. I decided I would gradually carry everything out of the attic. I don't need someone else's junk. You could hear the house waking up. Water was quietly flowing through the heating pipes. Warmth was rising upward. I climbed down from the attic and heard as if someone was walking around the living room. Thud, thud, thud. And then there was a raspy man's cough. I ran in, but nobody was there. Footsteps and cough stopped immediately. It spooked me, but I figured it was my imagination, out of habit. It's always noisy in the city, sometimes a train passes, sometimes neighbors stomping, but in the village, it's quiet. That's why your mind starts making up all sorts of sounds. Really, it's so quiet. Not a single dog is barking, and there are no sounds from any domestic birds. It's as if there's no life around at all. This isn't how I imagined the atmosphere of the countryside. Before dark, I managed to wipe off dust and remove cobwebs from every corner. I washed floors. House looked noticeably cleaner. I screwed energy-saving bulbs into chandeliers. I unpacked my things and made the bed. It felt really cozy now. I sat in the bedroom with a mug of tea, trying to soak in the spirit of village life, but I still didn't feel the comfort I was hoping for. On the contrary, there was a restlessness in my chest. That creepy portrait came to mind again. A knock at the door. An envelope with a note on the porch and a box of lynx pelts in the attic, footsteps and coughing in an empty room. So many strange things had piled up in just one day. But I was so tired that soon there was no room left for worry. Sleep came as soon as I pulled the blanket over myself. At night, the house filled with sounds, and it was impossible to tell which were real and which were imagined. Jars clinked and boxes shifted in the attic. Window frames rattled in the kitchen. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Someone was walking around, coughing and snickering nastily. In my sleep, I remember that the gate and doors are locked. No one could come to me. It was hot. So hot that my body was drenched in sweat under the blanket. The air became dry and scorching. I couldn't wake up for a long time, only managed it by sheer effort. By will, I dragged myself from tormenting sleep. Inside the house, it was hot as a sauna. Impossible to breathe. Even the wallpaper peeled off the walls. The boiler was breathing fire. Its roar echoed throughout the house. I crawled out of bed and ran into the hallway. The heat made it hard to breathe. What on earth is going on here? Flames were raging in the little window behind the glass. The gas boiler was running at full power. Someone had turned the knob all the way up. There's no way it could have turned by itself. Frightened, I grabbed the valve with my fingers and jerked my hand back. Damn it, the hard plastic. It was so hot it burned me, raising blisters. I took off my t-shirt, wrapped it around the handle, and turned the gas down. I was scared. What does all this mean? Did they sell me a haunted house? Is that why it was so cheap? The skin was peeling off the tips of my fingers from the burns. I opened the front door to cool down the house. Finally, some cool air. I almost suffocated in that heat. Dawn was already beginning. The sun hadn't risen yet, but a pale strip of light had appeared on the horizon, and on the porch, someone had left another handmade envelope. A note on a white sheet of paper, the same messy handwriting. Rule number 2, keep the doors and windows closed. Yeah, so I can suffocate. I crumpled up the paper and kicked it far out into the yard. I wanted to fight for my house. I bought it with every penny I had. With the coming of dawn, the weirdness wasn't as scary anymore, and it felt like I could stand up to it. I deliberately opened the windows in the living room, the bedroom, and the kitchen. I've got my own rules. Deal with it. Burned fingers. I covered them with band-aids. The house became cool inside. My anger also subsided. The rule had been broken, and nothing happened in response, so that means I won. I lay on the couch in the living room. I wanted to lie, to meditate, but after a restless night, sleep overtook me. And then it started again, sounds, rustling, squeaking, and snorting. I opened my eyes and saw something terrifying. Through the open windows, swarms of some kind of creatures were crawling in. They looked like rats, only hairless and a deep crimson red. Rubbing my eyes, I realized they really were rats, but without any skin. Just bare flesh, covered in bloody moisture. There were so many of them. The skinned rodents were falling from the windowsill. They were running everywhere, climbing onto my couch, their black eyes gleaming, mad, ugly rats, crawling in and in. I jumped off the couch, stepping on the rodents, made it to the windows and slammed them shut. Pain shot through my leg. One skinned rat had sunk, its yellow teeth into my skin. The others, as if on command, started attacking me. I screamed. I tore the rats off myself and threw them against the walls. Both the walls and the rats were left with crimson stains. I got hold of a metal dustpan that had been left in the room after cleaning, and I started beating those rabid creatures. I was chopping them in half, cutting off their tails, and beheading them. The animals died with a single blow, but their numbers didn't decrease. More kept coming, even through the door. This was my punishment for breaking the rule. I ran into the hallway, crushed several rats with the door, but managed to close it. Those that didn't make it inside scurried and snorted on the porch, banging on the windows. I finished off the rats that were left in the house. They weren't attacking me anymore. Instead, they were desperately looking for cracks to hide in. A few squeezed behind the wardrobe, others found holes in the floor and crammed themselves in. They crawled into the gaps between the walls and the pipes. My hands and legs were covered in bites that had already started to swell. I got up from all fours and saw what my house had turned into. There was blood everywhere and skinned rat corpses. What was happening reminded me of the biblical story about the plagues that struck the Egyptians for refusing to obey the demands, the punishment of blood, the plague of frogs, boils, and sores. What will happen next time? I didn't follow the rules, and I was punished. No, I overestimated myself. You can't win in this fight against the devilry. I had to escape. While I was still alive, I went to the door, but it was gone. The door had disappeared. Next to the gas boiler, there was only a wall, and it was even covered with wallpaper, as if nothing had ever been there. And it wasn't a mirage. My palms felt the solid wall. And on the floor lay a letter. Another damned letter. No way, no more big games. I need to get out before the windows disappear, I thought, and I rushed to the kitchen. The rats were gone. Outside, there was only the yard, dusted with a bit of snow and bare bushes. I tried to turn the window handle, but I couldn't move it. I tried another window, but it was also shut tight. Adrenaline was boiling in my veins. I wanted to get out immediately, grabbed a stool and hurled it at the window. Cracks spread across the glass, but it stayed in the frame. I grabbed the stool again, but the cracks had already disappeared. In front of me was a whole, unbroken window again. I hit it again and again. The glass would be covered with a web of fine cracks, and then instantly become clear again. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break it. I was locked inside this house. Blood pounded in my temples, my burned fingers ached. Rat bites all over my body throbbed painfully. My strength had left me. It was some kind of nightmare. Let me go, I shouted, not even knowing who I was talking to. The rooms were silent. Only somewhere inside the walls, rats were crawling, squeaking and gnawing with their teeth. Easy, easy. I need to calm down and think, I said, taking a deep breath. My phone. I have a phone. The emergency services number. Let them help me get out of here. My thoughts were so tangled that I couldn't remember the 3-digit number right away. There was a dial tone, and then an overloaded voice from the speaker said my name. Yura. A loud voice asked, then drew out the word. Hello. I meticulously and carefully tore open the sealed envelope, my fingers trembling slightly with anticipation, and then I intently looked at the single, crisp sheet of paper contained within. It clearly stated, as the third crucial rule, that absolutely no phone calls were permitted under any circumstances, emphasizing a strict policy of communication restriction. I should have read this earlier, before I got the idea to pick up the phone. And now I was facing a new punishment for breaking the rule. What is it this time? Maybe I've already used up all my chances to prove I'm obedient. Maybe now this damned house will kill me. And suddenly, the day was over. The sun outside the windows went out, and darkness fell abruptly. That couldn't have happened. Maybe I did sleep through the whole morning on the couch, but definitely not the entire day. And besides, twilight never comes that fast. The windows were still in their places. Beyond them, a snowy emptiness and a cold, starry sky. It was as if I'd been thrown several hours forward. I turned on the light. The lamps lit up for just a moment, then went out. The only thing I managed to see was another envelope. It was lying on the living room carpet. I found it in the dark. The only source of light now was the tiny flame in the gas boiler. I tore open the paper, held the sheet up to the weak flame, and read it. Rule number 4. Don't make noise and don't talk. I had no desire to take any more risks. I knew that breaking a rule would be punished. I went back to the living room, climbed onto the couch, and pressed the note to my chest. I was going to sit like that for as long as it took, trying to be as quiet as possible. I was even breathing almost silently. Someone appeared in the house again. At first, I heard his footsteps in the bedroom, then they moved down the hallway. A vile, mocking laughter echoed everywhere, and in the room appeared him. This man was the very embodiment of horror. He entered backwards, as if in reverse, and stood with the back of his head facing me. Laughter rang out, and his shoulders shook. Then, without lifting his feet from the floor, he arched his back, and his upside-down face ended up right in front of mine. "How do you like it in my house?" he asked. I squeezed my eyes shut in fear and bit my lower lip. The terrifying voice kept repeating, "How do you like it in my house? In my house. In my house. In my house." I didn't want to scream. It felt like my voice had died from terror. I thought I would die too, but I endured this ordeal. Footsteps, knocks, clanging, laughter, the terrifying voice. Hours passed in an unending nightmare. I sat with my eyes closed and didn't make a sound. And then it was morning again. A gloomy day stood outside the windows. The snowfall had covered the road and the distant houses. It was quiet. How much longer do I have to stay silent? How long do I have to walk on tiptoe so the floorboards don't creak? Another envelope was lying on the windowsill. I tore it open very slowly. The paper barely rustled. Rule 5. Don't ask me for anything. I didn't have time to grasp the meaning of the text. I was distracted by a person outside the window, a dark coat against the white snow. He was walking down the road past the house's windows. Without even realizing it, I slammed my fist against the glass and shouted, "Help!" The man stopped, turned toward me, and froze. I recognized that smile. It was the man from the portrait, which was now gathering dust in the attic. He froze, and the snow in the air froze too, as if time had stopped. Outside the window was an unreal reality. Everything I saw was a deception. The cruel master of the house was playing his games again, already preparing a new punishment for me for breaking the rules. The gas boiler went out, and the temperature in the house immediately began to drop. With every breath, steam came out of my mouth. I tried to light a fire, but nothing worked. The heating pipes were covered in frost, the water in the toilet froze, and it cracked. Dead rats lay on the floor. They had turned into icy lumps that were easy to trip over. I put on 2 sweaters and a jacket, but it didn't save me from the merciless cold. My tears froze, and my eyelashes stuck together. The lowest circle of hell, eternal cold. I climbed up to the attic and found a photo portrait, some nails, and a hammer. I didn't even know myself why I was doing it. Maybe I just wanted to fix what I had disturbed when I came here. Shivering from the cold, I went back to the living room. With trembling hands, I hammered a nail into the wall and hung the portrait back in its old place. Then I went to the bedroom and, still wearing my jacket, wrapped myself in a blanket. It was no use, it was just too cold. Darkness fell again, smoothly, like a fading screen. There was neither snow nor stars outside the windows. The house was plunged into absolute darkness. I was freezing and I heard a voice. "Do you want to get out of here?" I stayed silent. "I know where the back door is here." "I'll show you," the voice promised. I didn't trust it and kept silent. "Let's go through the back door. The black door. Come with me into the darkness." You shouldn't fall asleep in the cold, but by then I didn't care anymore. I just wanted it all to be over. I woke up in the morning, still in my jacket and under the blanket. The house had returned to its former state. The windows were boarded up. There were no dead rats in the rooms, just dust and a mess. And the door had appeared again. Laughing like a madman, I ran out into the yard, then through the gate. I was so happy to get out of there. It felt like my captivity had lasted for several days, but in reality, not even a day had passed. My interest in country life was gone for good. It was only 5 years later that I came back to see what had become of that house. It hadn't changed at all over the years. From a distance, it seemed to me that there was light shining through the boarded-up windows. According to the documents, that house is still my property. But it seems like it always had another owner. I never went back there again,